Welcome to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer, Professor of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I serve as the host of the program. Joining me today are our two regular viewmeisters. On my right is Denise Keel. Denise is a professor of political science at Western Michigan University. She also works in the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability and serves as the chair of the WMU Working Group on Climate Change. On my left is Don Cooney, who is a professor in the School of Social Work at WMU, and Don is also a city commissioner. Well, it's good to be back together, and we have on the political agenda right now the Mueller report. The Office of Special Counsel has finally issued his report about Russian interference in the 2016 election, and has a volume concerning obstruction of justice concerning the Trump administration efforts to derail that investigation. And so there's a lot for us to talk about today. So I think the way in which I would like to proceed today is to first of all talk about Attorney General William Barr and how he handled the receipt of the report from the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Second, we can look at the two volumes of the special counsel's report, one which focuses on Russian interference, second which focuses on obstruction of justice. And I think as we consider the obstruction of justice volume and the evidence presented by the special counsel, we will be led to raise the question of what are we going to do about this, and what is the Congress going to do? And so that brings us to the issue of impeachment. So I think we'll probably want to focus some of our time today talking about that. So does that sound like a lineup? Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan. I apologize for my froggy voice. Hopefully it sticks with us.
So Denise will chip in as best she can with that.
I'll have to be succinct. I'll try.
Well, let's start with the fact that, of course, Robert Mueller was appointed as the special counsel by Rod Rosenstein in the Department of Justice after Jeff Sessions recused himself. And so this was based on concerns that the FBI and the Justice Department had about attempts by the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 election, and the fact that they appeared to be engaging in an effort to interfere in favor of Donald Trump, hoping to get Donald Trump elected. The question was, what kind of contact was there between Trump and the Russians? And so that motivated the investigation. Now, it took sort of 2 long years of investigating by the special counsel, but Mueller, of course, is known for being very systematic and left no stone unturned, it appeared, in searching for evidence concerning this issue. Now, because the special counsel was appointed by the Department of Justice, the report first had to go to now Attorney General William Barr, who in the interim had replaced Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General. And so when William Barr received it, there was a lot of concern about what he would do with it, right? And Denise, what did he do with it?
Well, don't forget there was another appointment, Whitaker, in between.
Yeah, there was another AG in between Sessions and Barr, you're right. Yeah.
So I think a lot of the report needs to be seen in the light of the strategy of the appointments of the Department of Justice, and how if a president is appointing those folks, and instead of being the lawyer for the people, which is what the Department of Justice is supposed to be doing, they're the lawyer for the president. That changes the strategy of who you put in that office, and it changes the strategy of someone like Mueller. So when Attorney General Barr comes out with 4 pages that summarize now we know 400-page...
448-page report.
I mean, we're talking about volume 1 and 2 here, not just page numbers. So coming out with a 4-page report that uses the most legalese language to stay in the middle, to then allow Donald Trump to go out and lie to the American people and say that this exonerates him, is a miscarriage of justice and the people's lawyer. I mean, at best.
Barr's 4-page summary, so let's put this into context. The special counsel's office provided summaries that could be released to the public. Nothing had to be redacted. There were no concerns about grand jury testimony. These kind of documents often have an executive summary
right.
that basically provides the overview of what's in the report. And so the Mueller team provided that to the Attorney General. What he should have done, of course, was, hey, here's the special counsel's report, here's the summary, the overview provided by the special counsel that I can legally release to you. But Barr didn't do that. What Barr did, of course, is to act like, in the words of Stephen Colbert, a feckless stooge
Pretty much.
for the president.
I mean,
he issued a summary that was very deceptive,
Yes.
that distorted the report of Mueller, that left out
yes.
the most important things, emphasized certain language in the report, taken completely out of context, and then tried to suggest that, well, the report exonerates the president.
Yeah.
There will be no charges, which is true. There will be no criminal indictments, but it certainly is a very strong distortion. And so Barr comes off as a lackey, an apologist for the president. He's operating as the president's defense counsel and not the attorney general, the lawyer for the United States of America, for the people of our country.
That's right.
And so that, to me, was just an appalling performance on the part of the attorney general to just mislead and mislead the American people and distort the report in itself.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's the first blush that the American people see.
That's right.
And already people are looking at it through the same eyes as the election. So the people that want to believe that Trump is innocent, this is what they get from it. And then that allows Trump to say, look, we got it.
That's right.
And so now, not many people are going to read the 448 pages, right? So that's what the American people are going to be seeing through the eyes of this man who distorts what is in the whole report.
That's right. We know that first perception is so important, right?
Exactly.
What does this mean? And for him to come out and say, oh, see, it was a
He's
witch
innocent.
hunt, I am totally exonerated, and that just be blatantly false.
Right.
So I'm glad we've pushed, and Congress has pushed, and the redacted, right? And the big question for a week has been, how redacted?
Right.
Are we going to be able to actually read anything, right?
There's also the point that there was a long delay.
Yes.
Right? So he got the report and delayed for almost a month.
That's right.
Before even coming out with the redacted report, right? So he gets the report, he issues a very distorted, deceptive summary.
Right.
He then waits almost a month before he actually provides the actual report.
Right.
And then, of course, when he provides it, it's full of redactions to block out certain information that he claims has to be left out because it's grand jury testimony or for other purposes. And then, of course, the day of the actual release, they time it for Easter weekend, right?
Yes.
So again, the Congress is gone, and people are ready to go off for a sort of a holiday weekend, and so let's issue it on the Thursday before Easter, when everybody's going to be gone.
Exactly.
So the timing. But not only that, he then held a press conference prior to the actual release of the redacted version. He then holds a press conference where he continues his deception, right? He continues with his interpretation, which is totally, I don't want to say totally false, but completely misleading, right? It's completely misleading. He's trying to frame the issue, right? He's trying to whitewash the very critical findings that are actually in there. So what is this? This is spin. This is propaganda coming from the Attorney General of the United States. He's trying to protect Donald Trump with this press conference and all of his actions leading up to this point.
And so David Brooks said that he had respect for Barr up until that press conference. And after the press conference, he lost all respect for him because it was so obviously distorted and prejudiced in favor of the president.
So how do we get a new Attorney General? That should be another question.
That should be another question.
That's a tough one.
All right, then we finally get the redacted version, right?
Goodness.
So now we have to start poring over 448 pages to see, well, what's really in there, right?
Yes.
And what we find, of course, is it's completely different from what Barr has tried to insinuate, what Trump has been claiming. And so again, the actual report is in 2 volumes.
Right.
First volume focuses on the central question of Russian interference, right? So what does Barr conclude about that? Denise?
What does Barr conclude, or what does Mueller conclude?
What's Mueller conclude?
Okay.
Yeah,
Right,
now we're
that's
actually
the-
to the
Yeah, so
report, right? Let's look at
I
what
do
Mueller
want to
has.
spend a minute on volume 1 because I actually think it's not getting the press and the diligence that it would deserve if that was the only thing we were investigating in this report. Because volume 2, obstruction, gets so much attention.
Right.
One of the things, if you were to just think about volume 1 on Russia coming out as a standalone thing, and it essentially says, yes, there was a criminal conspiracy by the Russians to interfere with the 2016 elections, right? And substitute any other country even for Russia, right? There was a foreign power absolutely interfere with our elections. That would be so newsworthy on its own, right, in this other maze of media spin. There was awareness
And it was engaging in these efforts to help
Donald Trump, absolutely.
elected.
The criminal
No question.
conspiracy by the Russians to interfere on Donald Trump's behalf, that there was awareness of those activities by the candidate and the campaign. That is absolutely clear. And not just awareness, the word Mueller likes is propensity, awareness, welcoming that assistance, right?
And capitalizing on
And
it.
to then lie about it over and over. There was absolutely a PR strategy then based around the fruits of the Russian conspiracy, right? So, come on, that alone should have us
Right.
really
The red lights should be
should
flashing.
be flashing.
right?
This is dangerous, wrong. Again, insert any foreign power, and I think the answer, I would hope the answer, even from our conservative friends, should be, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And the Trump campaign did not report this to the FBI,
They did not.
to any other
Right.
legal authorities, to the Department of Justice. It didn't say, hey, guess what? The Russians are trying to interfere on our behalf in this, which is what their legal obligation,
That's right.
their duty should have been, right?
No, at every time, and if you actually look at the parts of the redacted report, at every meeting that does include the president, it'll say such and such was in a room, we had a conversation together, but that's all redacted from
Yeah.
the foreign power. But the end is always the president's response that says, that's great. So I don't think it leaves a lot to be, the dots are pretty close together there on that. But I did want to spend just a minute on conspiracy, right? There is a definition, okay, of conspiracy in the law.
Criminal
And
conspiracy.
Criminal conspiracy. And that's, you and I have an agreement, and that we have an agreement to do something that's illegal, and that I take some step to effectuate that agreement, right? And that's, I think, where it does become a toss-up. I mean, different prosecutors might decide differently whether that case for Trump was there.
Yeah, yeah.
Because unfortunately, we are left with the answer that he could have been being taken advantage of. Trump could have been taken advantage of, right? That he gets himself into this by some sort of series of mistakes and just being
Stumble.
not smart, that you could now be a counterintelligence problem for the United States because you're talking to the Russians
Right.
about our election. And so he sort of gets off in some way just because it's like, it reminds me of Reagan and Iran-Contra when I was first coming of age.
Yeah.
Is the problem that he knew or that he didn't know? Right?
Which is worse.
Which is worse. And I feel like we're in that situation. Definitely we can prove the Russians conspiracy, right? They did met all three
Sure.
of those standards,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But whether Trump is just falling into it or they chose to follow the wrong email leads, and so those didn't actually pan out, right? So I can't effectuate the strategy.
yeah.
But
Well-
I think it's a close call.
So again, the term collusion is the one that jumps
Right.
out all the time, and Trump, endlessly, no collusion, no collusion. And collusion is not a legal term,
Right.
There's what Trump or what Mueller, by the way, actually is looking at is, was there a criminal conspiracy, right? Was there a criminal conspiracy? Was there definitive coordination
Right.
between the Russian efforts to interfere in the election and the Trump campaign? Now, the Mueller report says that there were extensive contacts. He
Yes.
documents extensive contacts.
There's like hundreds.
They were sweeping and systematic.
Yes.
This is Mueller's language. They were sweeping and systematic. But in the end, he was not able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there had been that criminal conspiracy, right? And here is part of the problem that Mueller outlines, is that part of the reason he was not able to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt was because he was stonewalled by the people who participated to a large extent. People lied.
Yes.
People refused to grant testimony. Trump himself, provided these written summaries in which he said he couldn't remember, like 50 times he couldn't remember, right? The man who claims he has the greatest memory in the history of the world. I have the greatest memory, he said, right? But he couldn't remember a single thing about that when under investigation by Mueller. So what Mueller says is that there were systematic and sweeping contacts. There was this effort to interfere with the election on behalf of Trump. The Trump people welcomed some of these contacts, but that because of the lack of testimony and the lies, the evidence was not sufficient to bring the charge of criminal conspiracy.
That's right. So then one of the questions becomes, why and who did you subpoena or not subpoena? And it was interesting, one of the legal analysis I was reading of someone who was reading the report and looking at Donald Trump Jr. So, he appears in there, he's subpoenaed, and the legal read of that particular redacted part is that, you were subpoenaed, you came in, blank out, blank out, blank out, and then for reasons, we're going to let you not testimony, which to most legal scholars seems to imply that he took the Fifth Amendment. He took the Fifth to say, I refuse to testify on the grounds that it may incriminate myself, right? And so then we're back to really who is the Attorney General and the bar and that whole situation, because if I'm Robert Mueller and I would like to probably subpoena Donald Trump, right? And then Donald Trump is left, he's probably going to take the Fifth, or special counsel, the AG is never going to let me carry through that subpoena. So how do you even get the correct testimony to make the rest of the case? Right. When I would have. Of course, it's every American's right to take the Fifth Amendment, but I think that's there's been a very interesting legal analysis of a few of those folks who probably took the Fifth in that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
I think about the Roger Stone piece in this whole thing, because he wasn't an employee, but clearly there was liaison between the Trump administration and the release of the email things.
Yeah, the contacts with WikiLeaks.
Well, yeah, and I think, again, whether it's by mistake or fantasy, right, this is, legally it's still a very close call, and Mueller is, again, trying to keep things totally above board and raising it to the standard of criminal charges.
I think we should probably point out that Robert Mueller, who's a Republican, right, former director of the FBI, is regarded as an institutional conservative.
Yes.
Which means that he places high respect on the institutional and procedural processes that have been laid out by the Department of Justice. That's important to understand for part of his reluctance here to move forward. Being the institutional conservative, he, in the end, and again, for all the times Trump was attacking Mueller and saying this was a witch hunt and that he was out to get him, in the end, Robert Mueller bent over backwards
to try to
be fair to Donald Trump. Bent over backwards, engaged in some legal contortions, I would even say, to
absolutely
to be fair to Donald Trump.
Be more than fair, because again, right, there's the facts, and then there's the application of the law to those facts. And just reading the facts, it gets 100 pages in Volume 1 of contact after contact with the campaign. And again, 9 times out of 10, the candidate or campaign's response to Russian interference is, explore that. That sounds great.
Good.
Thank
you.
Right?
The New York Times, in its editorial on the Mueller report, said that this part of the report provides evidence of a pattern of deceit and dysfunction in the Trump administration. Even if it didn't rise to the level of criminal conspiracy, there was certainly this pattern of deceit and dysfunction concerning handling these
and
these
again,
Russian
that
efforts.
alone should be enough to focus our attention on the illegitimacy of our system, how our systems are working, and this presidency. That alone. Now, Volume 2.
Well, before we go there, let me just also point out that there are two other things to keep in mind here, that as a result of the Mueller investigation, the Office of Legal Counsel investigation, there are ongoing prosecutions. And 34 people have been indicted for various criminal charges growing out of this investigation, Roger Stone being one of them. Of course, Paul Manafort, who was the campaign chairman for the Trump campaign. And there are others, of course, his private attorney, Cohen. And so, yes, a lot of people who were very central to the campaign and surrounding Donald Trump have been indicted and charged and in many cases convicted already. So there are those ongoing prosecutions. Plus, the Mueller team, the Office of Legal Counsel, has also made referrals to other jurisdictions.
New York.
There are 14 referrals, and we don't really know what those are.
We do not.
We don't know what those are. These are so there could be some sealed indictments that are already in there, just waiting for the right time for those indictments to be revealed. So it may be that some people very close to the president, perhaps the president himself, although I'm not so sure about that, have been indicted. We just don't know. But there's still a lot out there. There's still a lot out there that we don't know in terms of the legal process. Now, in addition to that, there are also the independent investigations that are going on in a number of other jurisdictions, particularly the Southern District of New York, which is investigating the Cohen thing and the relationship of the campaign finance contribution violations, the Stormy Daniels payoffs and all of that. So even if you put the best interpretation on this report, as Barr tried to do, of course, Donald Trump and his administration is still in a heap of legal trouble.
That's right.
There's still a lot out there that is ongoing in terms of legal investigations. All right, ready to go to volume 2?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Volume 2 is perhaps, again, getting most of the attention.
It is, yes.
And perhaps also raises some of the most serious questions here about what the President of the United States did or attempted to do. And basically what Robert Mueller lays out are 10 or 11, depending on how you count, attempts to basically obstruct justice. Mueller concludes that Trump had corrupt intent. He was trying to shut down the investigation into the Russian interference. He took a number of very concrete steps to try to do that, right? And he lays out an evidentiary path that is compelling and overwhelming, right? There is substantial evidence that the President of the United States broke federal law on numerous occasions, that there was a pattern of deception, repeated efforts to impede the investigation, abuse of power. This is all laid out in the second volume. Now, the bottom line here is, why didn't Robert Mueller act on that evidence and indict?
That's right. So because of Article 2 and executive power. So any good prosecutor, and again, let's just think about the definition of obstruction. I lie, or I ask other people to lie, in order that in a material way affects my fact-finding mission, right? So those conclusions are very, very clear. So a good prosecutor, though, thinks about what is going to be the defense to my case, to my accusations. And there are two things happening here. The Office of Legal Counsel has a sort of rule, a sort of premise that it's unduly burdensome to indict a sitting president, right? So I really think that we should view both volumes in that light, and that someone like Mueller probably thinks he has two choices. This report either exonerates or does not. It does not make formal charges. He lays out the facts. This is the fact-finding machine.
Nothing but the facts, man, nothing but the facts.
To get us there, right? So because the main defense, right, again, this is what a good lawyer is going to think about, is that the president is going to argue Article 2 executive power allows me, this is the legitimate use of executive power to change these appointments, to what Trump always says, I have every right to fire Mueller. If I wanted to fire him, I would have done it myself. The one guy who doesn't do it saves them, basically. He doesn't even realize that, I
White
think.
House counsel Don McGahn.
Thank you, McGahn.
McGahn, who Trump ordered on several occasions to fire Mueller.
That's right.
And McGahn basically refused to do it.
That's right.
And was prepared to resign.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
didn't carry out the
And
order.
because he didn't carry out that order, we have one less chink in the armor, but that makes Trump very angry. Right, the prosecutor also only brings these cases when, the government likes to win, right? You need reasonable probability of conviction to bring any case. And I think that a legitimate executive power, whether we like it or not, that argument would appeal to some jurors if this came right, because we know there's a strong base out there who thinks, yeah, sure, that is the president's power. Of course they get to appoint Barr or their lackey. That's what it's about. He's just doing it, doing what we expect all you dirty politicians to do, basically, right? But the corruption is the most important part. That's the word that
Corrupt
you said.
intent.
So I think that most scholars would say, that's fine. Yeah, you have the power to make those appointments, but you don't have the power to, make those appointments with a bribe, with a pardon hanging out, right? Yes, you have the power to make pardons, but not in the corrupt way that you're using it as leverage within those situations. And that is the fine little hair that Mueller has to split. And he finds it is not free of corruption. The even legal acts that you may have done in pardoning or changing out attorney generals, they are not free of corruption. And again, that's like the strongest finding I think he can make within the confines of his responsibility.
Let's go back for a little bit and focus on this Office of Legal Counsel ruling. So that goes back to the days of Spiro Agnew
That's
and
right.
Richard Nixon.
1974.
Don, you remember Spiro Agnew?
I was going to say.
I do.
This is where you guys get to help.
What was he, head of the school board in Maryland before he got to be vice president, and then he took checks?
It was governor. Governor of Maryland also.
That's
He
right.
was governor after that.
Yeah. But he was taking kickbacks and bribes while in office,
That's
continued
right.
to do that when he became vice president. This was discovered, and the question was, could they indict Spiro Agnew?
Yeah.
And so the Office of Legal Counsel basically came up and said, well, you probably can't indict the president because that would be too disruptive to his
right.
duties. But the vice president doesn't do anything, right? The vice president's
That's right.
unimportant
So
in
go-
our
go
system.
get
So
him.
yeah, you can go ahead and indict him.
Totally.
That's where this comes from.
That's exactly
It
right.
wasn't even a question of Nixon himself.
No.
It was Agnew, and they wanted to indict Agnew.
That's right.
And so to indict Agnew, they had to sort
Correct.
of clear this legal hurdle. And they said, well, okay, we'll say that you can't indict the president because that would be too disruptive, but it's okay to indict the vice president.
That's right.
And that's where this comes
That's
from.
where it comes from, and it actually is updated. Our only other recent example of impeachment proceedings, Clinton, in 1998, and the Office of Legal Counsel stands by that and updates that in a ruling in 2000.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
after
Precedent.
right?
There's some precedent now,
There
right?
is, right? And it's not. You can see why that is a law, right? Unduly burdensome to indict a sitting president. At the same time, right? You don't get to play both sides, is I guess where I sit with Trump. Are you Article 2 executive power, or are you a citizen that can take the Fifth Amendment and do all these other things? He gets to play both sides, and I think that's what is so unduly unfair about the arguments that are being presented against him, right?
Yeah.
So he didn't claim that. He did the written.
It's unclear. I think that Mueller decided not. One of my questions was why not subpoena Trump, right?
Right.
And I think that the attorney, they just would have barred it, or
It would have been a protracted legal
it would have
battle.
taken another
Yeah.
2 years.
Would
So
have gone to the Supreme Court.
I want to
and-
get this over with. I want to get the facts
Yeah.
out now before the next election.
Yeah.
See what that can do.
Yeah.
He's probably going to take the Fifth anyways.
Yeah.
And here's where we
Like-
see Mueller being the institutional conservative
That's right.
coming into play, right? Okay, the Office of Legal Counsel made this ruling back in the 70s. It's been, in a sense, that precedent has been set. It was reinforced under the Clinton,
Yes.
during the Clinton years. And so, being the institutional conservative, I'm going to abide
Stick
by
with
that,
that.
right?
That's right.
He basically argued that this ruling tied his hands.
That's right.
Right? That there was an insurmountable legal problem. He wanted to indict Trump. I mean, he makes that
Yeah.
clear.
Yes.
And he says, look, if I could have exonerated the president on these charges, I would have done
That's
so.
right.
But I can't.
But he cannot.
I cannot exonerate him on these charges.
And he also cannot indict.
But I also can't indict.
Right.
Right?
So,
So hence we have this
Ah.
issue. So
Right.
he lays it out, right? He lays out all the evidence. He says, I
Yes.
can't bring the indictment because of this OLC ruling that I will abide by and ties my hands, but I can certainly lay out all of the evidence, which
That's right.
I think is extremely strong. It does not allow me to exonerate the president on these issues.
Yes.
And so that leaves it up to
Dun, dun, dun.
Our Congress.
Congress. Article 1. Uh-oh. We're in trouble now.
It leaves it up to Congress. Or the other possibility there that I think Mueller refers to is that once Trump leaves office,
That's
right.
he could be charged with these,
I think, yeah.
with this.
And like you, so I think it was important, Ron, to bring up that there are 34 other indictments coming
Yeah,
out
yeah.
of this process.
Yeah.
So that should also tell you there was enough there. But Mueller is saying, I am bound by the institutional constraints, and we do not indict sitting presidents. But here you
So-
go, gift of
Yeah.
facts and dots connected very closely.
So the 34 indictments,
Yeah.
what were they for? There's a variety of them, but some of them were for obstruction of justice, right?
Mom probably knows this better than I
This
do.
is Manafort, Stone, Cohen.
Some
you know,
campaign finance, because those were
I mean,
easier
they
to
uncovered
prove.
a variety of
Right.
Yes.
But some of
Criminal
them, weren't they,
violations.
some of them obstruction?
Obstruction.
Yeah,
Some
yeah.
of them is-
Definitely with Manafort.
That's right.
yeah, lying, because he lied. I mean,
He lied.
he had a plea
Right.
deal.
Exactly.
And then they had to go back into court and say, all right, the plea deal's off,
That's
this guy's
right.
lied to
Right.
us.
That's right.
Cohen,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So all those are indictments for obstruction, right? So,
Right.
yeah,
so if they're all guilty of obstruction,
yes.
okay.
That's right.
And again, I think it's important to point out that Trump's staff saved him to some extent
Right.
here
Absolutely.
because he was attempting, he clearly had the corrupt intent, as Mueller says,
Yes.
to interfere with the investigation, to undermine the investigation, to obstruct, right?
Yes.
He intended to obstruct. He fired Comey, right? That's one thing he was able to carry out, and even admitted on television that, hey, I fired Comey because of this Russia
That's
thing,
right.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
there couldn't be clear evidence on that, right?
That's right.
But then ordering McGahn
That's
to
right.
fire Mueller and to get rid of Mueller, and McGahn refused to do it on 2 separate occasions. Now, Trump came out yesterday, by the way, and said, I never told McGahn to fire Mueller. Okay, now, we know Donald Trump lies ceaselessly, right?
It's amazing.
And that this is
This
obviously...
guy did him a huge favor.
This is obviously another lie, because for that to be
Yeah.
true, an attorney as skilled as Don McCann
Oh.
would have had to lie under oath to
Oh.
the special counsel,
No.
which is perjury, right?
Right.
He would have had to commit perjury. He would have had to lie under oath to
right.
the special counsel. An attorney like Don McGahn is not going to do that,
He'd
right?
be disbarred, he'd be...
And so
yeah.
we know for sure that Trump saying, I never told McGahn to do this is a lie. McGahn testified under oath to the special counsel that this did in fact happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Right.
so we know it's all there, but again, now what happens from here, right? Where do we go from here?
well-
So in a sense, Mueller had to punt the
Yes.
ball to Congress. Now
Absolutely.
what's Congress going to do with the ball?
Well, that's why, then I think the way to think about this is, so if we are going to abide by this rule, which may be wrong and we may need to change, right? That we're not going to indict sitting presidents, then we have 2 ways to remove a president from office. We have impeachment, we have, right, Congress, or we have elections. And I think that is what our current Congress is struggling with.
Right.
Right? And that is even a tough decision for them. It's really, I think, indicative of the times that we are in. The politics that need to be played surrounding the next election, in my humble opinion, are taking over the actual duty of Congress, given the facts laid out in front of them, to follow their Article 1 responsibilities and move forward with the evidence that Mueller has laid at their feet, basically. And there are 2 ways.
Right.
Which,
So Don, should Congress impeach Donald Trump?
Well,
What do you think?
the,
The evidence
I know,
is clear.
I mean,
Should they
it's
do
a
it?
tough, right?
I think it's a very hard choice.
It is.
Because that people are so, look, the most important thing is the election in 2020, I would think. This is me. But people on Trump's side are not going to hear it. They don't want to hear anything about it. They will believe that this is a witch hunt because that's what he will keep feeding them.
And of course, Barr set that up for them with
Right,
the way he handled
exactly.
the report.
That's right. They've heard from Barr that he no collusion, nothing. So that, and this is that they've stopped there. It's over for them now. They got that.
They're not listening to anything else. They're not reading the Mueller report.
No.
The only thing they heard, Barr said, he's exonerated.
Right.
Trump says, I've been completely exonerated. That's all they need to know.
Exactly.
They're done with this
so
whole thing. Let's move on.
Right. And then the second thing they'll be saying is, we got important problems here.
Yes.
Why are we wasting all this time on that?
right.
We already wasted 2 years.
That's right.
So I think that's the political cost. So the question for me is, if they do investigations
Right.
and they have people come in and testify, and that's going to take quite a while,
Yes.
and then the election will make the decision. Or they could go for impeachment, but I think the political risks, and I think that's what Nancy Pelosi has concluded, is just not worth it. So I think that's where they are.
They are. That's why I say that it's a definitely electoral politics decision. The polling is not there.
Right.
Only 34% of the American public supports impeachment.
That's right.
Nancy
That's
Pelosi
right.
sees that number and says, no way. If we went out and asked most people, no, they don't care about that. You're exactly right. That's why you're such a good politician, because they still care about health care and all
we
these
care.
other
We don't want to set this up
we
for
don't
a
want to
victory
be
for
wasting our
Trump.
time on that.
So my question is, though, Trump is forbidding people to go testify before Congress.
Yes.
That has to be settled. Because if you can't get McGahn to come in, you can't get Mueller to come in,
That's right.
then what are the hearings going to be
Right.
about?
Because the political middle ground is sort of what I hear you also suggesting, is to continue investigations.
Yeah.
Right, and to continue to, I think you could use investigations and get people to come in to testify and use things like focus on volume 1 rather than volume 2, right? You should be able to win over constitutional conservatives with the fact that a foreign power interfered with our election, and what are we doing about that, regardless of the name Trump. And I think there might be a way to use investigations, which like 2/3 of the American public supports.
Right.
Yeah, you could keep looking at it, right? There might be a way, and I think that's what Pelosi is thinking, there might be a way to utilize that strategy in all the reporting that's going on in order to get the publicity and the op-eds that need to be written and other viewpoints out there that might change enough folks' minds for the electoral politics, right? Now, why I have finally come to the conclusion of impeachment, though, is because I also believe in institutions, and I've really wrestled with this because to me it is also a very dangerous thing to say the way that we will fix our system is if you elect me. And I feel like that's what we're starting to say as Democrats, and we're starting to say, you know what, the way to fix the system is for me to win. And Democrats winning in 2020, I would love that, may not be the best institutional response to the crisis we're having right now. And there is a duty in Article 1 to first stand up for what is happening right now. And that is what has sort of finally swayed my own mind over to...
Yeah.
I've wrestled with it because I'm pragmatic.
I agree completely. So yes, there are a number of political and pragmatic calculations that the Democrats are making. And again, I think Democrats tend to be somewhat wishy-washy about this. And I really wish that they would develop more of a spine, because I think that impeachment is a moral imperative at this point. I mean, if you don't impeach Donald Trump, based on this overwhelming amount of evidence that he had these extensive contacts with a foreign country trying to interfere with our election on his behalf, and that he obstructed justice at every turn. If that's not high crimes and misdemeanors, if that's not an impeachable offense, then whatever will be an impeachable offense. We might as well take the impeachment clause out of the Constitution.
Agreed.
If we don't use it now, when it seems so clearly indicated, why even have it in there? it'll never be used ever
Yep.
if we don't use it in this case. So I think there's a moral imperative based on the fact that these crimes have occurred. Silence is assent
It
to
is.
these crimes. If we fail to fulfill the constitutional duty, then again, it's we're being complicit with the crimes that have been committed.
That's right.
And so, to me, it just it has to be done. Now, of course, if the House would would impeach Donald Trump, then that means that a trial will be required in the Senate. The Senate has to convict by a 2/3 majority. That's not going to
It's
happen.
not,
Right.
exactly.
That's not
Political
gonna
reality.
happen.
So, but your choice here is, again, do you want to run this country only on electoral politics? Or is there still a rule?
Hyper-partisan electoral.
Right, fueled by this hyper-partisan? Or do you also want to maintain some sort of institutional rule of law? And that, to me, now seems to be the choice that Mueller has laid at the feet of the folks who are represented right now, who have that duty. And it's been a hard one for me because I do think it will hurt. Absolutely. Look what happened after Clinton.
Yeah.
Yes, the Republicans, and there would be no doubt what the Republicans would do in this situation if the name on that report was Barack Obama. All right, no doubt that we
Yeah.
would be in impeachment proceedings. But look what happened. Even when that did come to a vote with Clinton, they lost mightily at the next election. The Republicans paid a heavy electoral price for bringing that. So I think you're right. That's exactly what would happen, and I think we should do it anyways. And it's a very painful thing for me to say.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that what happened after the Clinton impeachment would happen again
Yeah?
here. I
Okay.
do think the situations are considerably different. That Trump's got his hardcore supporters and nothing's going to sway them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a lot of other people outside, nothing will sway those people. So no matter what you
no,
do,
they're soft.
they're with Trump.
That's right, so you might as well, in a way. They're already lost.
But I don't think there are that many other people
Oh, that might be true.
who are increasingly opposed to this president, who increasingly register their disapproval of the way he's handled himself in office. I mean, I think they see that
Yeah.
Donald Trump is an unethical man with no regard for the rule of law, and that would be completely demonstrated by an impeachment trial in the Senate.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people would, outside of Trump's base, I don't think people would consider that to be an untoward use of congressional power, constitutional power. So I don't think the situations are exactly the same. I don't think the result would be the same. So I think Democrats are fretting about this, and of course they're right to fret. You always want to fret about what's going to happen in
Absolutely.
the next election, and the 2020 election is so critical for so many reasons.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think they have a constitutional duty to fulfill. I don't think that some of their worst fears about the political consequences would in fact come true. And that, again, they need to stand up for
Yeah.
the rule of law. They need to stand up for the Constitution.
Yeah.
They need to stand up for what's right.
Yeah.
And if we don't do it now, when will we ever do it?
Yeah, well, I hope there's some truth to that there wouldn't be drastic electoral consequences to an impeachment. I do think there might be a way to get some non-leftists. Again, where are the constitutional conservatives?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
There are some issues
Sure.
where we should be able to find some real agreement to at least move forward with that would handily critique the president and help some conservatives find their value base again, and perhaps not then suffer the electoral consequences that we might otherwise expect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, I think there are traditional Republicans, Romney's step forward,
That's right.
and David Brooks,
Right.
and others who are mainstream Republicans
That's
who
true.
would say, no, this is intolerable.
This
We
is-
draw the line here.
Yes.
So my question is, how do these hearings go forward
I
if
know.
we can't get these people to testify? Is he going to prevail on that? Is he going to get away with that? Is he going to say McGahn can't testify, Mueller can't testify, none of these people can
I
testify?
think that's what's happening.
I think we're setting ourselves up for a bit of a constitutional crisis.
That's
Yes.
right.
On the one hand, the Trump administration did not claim executive privilege with
No.
regard to the Mueller investigation.
Right.
They did not say nobody can go over and
That's
give
right.
testimony because of executive privilege. They did not exercise that claim.
Right.
Right. which is usually a very dubious claim anyhow,
Yes.
right? You know, it's usually a very shaky kind of thing to exert executive privilege, a la Richard Nixon, right?
Yes.
But even that shaky grounds, they didn't exercise that. So now, on what basis do you
Right.
say nobody
Right.
can go over and testify?
It would have to go to the Supreme Court, no question about it.
And that's always a dangerous thing with the current composition of the court.
Exactly. I mean,
But again, on what basis can Trump say Congress doesn't have the ability to
Right.
investigate? Congress is a co-equal branch of our government.
Yeah.
yes.
Article 1
That's right.
focuses on the Congress. It was the first.
That's
It
number
was the
one.
first institution
They've
to be
forgotten
addressed,
that.
right? And so the framers certainly saw the
Yes,
Congress
sir.
as being perhaps first among equals, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Congress has the power to carry out investigations, and but again, it needs to have the cooperation of the other branches of government to carry out its investigations.
That's right.
And in this case, Trump is attempting to stonewall, and I don't think they have a constitutional leg to stand on. They don't have any legal grounds to restrict. But of course, Donald Trump is violating all the possible norms of our democratic
Exactly.
process, right?
That's right.
I mean, this is essentially, I think we have a cover of the book, How Democracies Die,
Yes.
that I think Daniel can put up on the screen for us. And
Right.
so these two political scientists, Levitsky and Ziblatt, argue that Donald Trump, they survey from around the world in different historical periods, ways in which democratic societies have collapsed, right?
Right.
And one of the key factors is the continual erosion of democratic norms about procedural and legal matters. And they devote a chapter in the book to what's been happening under Trump. And this book was written before the Mueller report
Yes.
was even known about.
Yes.
If they'd had the Mueller report, they could demonstrate even more how those democratic norms are being violated. And now we're seeing once again, in the effort to carry out additional congressional investigations, which is the legal and political prerogative of Congress to do, those are now being stonewalled, blocked illegally, unconstitutionally by Trump.
Right.
Again, a further degradation of the norms of a democratic society, which
That's
is
right.
leading us down a path that I don't think very many Americans would really like to go.
Yeah.
This is how authoritarian governments act. This is how dictators act.
Right.
This is not how constitutionally empowered presidents operate under Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States of America.
Yeah.
But this is a Supreme Court which is about to rule that they can put on the census a question about citizenship.
That's right.
Which scientists have said 6 million plus people will not cooperate, and they're willing to put that on the census. This
That's
is
right.
the Supreme Court we're dealing with. That's what scares me.
The only question I have about this current Supreme Court is, where does Justice Roberts stand?
Yeah.
I mean, Anthony Kennedy has gone, and so the swing vote is no longer there, right?
Yeah.
Justice Roberts is not a Justice Kennedy, but he still can be somewhat of a swing vote.
Absolutely.
And I think he, as the Chief Justice, has to also be concerned with the historical legacy of the court under his
That's right.
guidance, right? So where does Justice Roberts come
Yeah.
down on this issue?
Yeah.
Denise,
Well,
do you have
that-
any
well-
ideas or inclinations about how he might operate? Or
Yeah, so we've seen Justice Roberts, Chief Justice, very conservative, in some ways make some very different decisions than our conservative values would have
Affordable
predicted. The ACA is a huge one, and he does that for institutional legitimacy. So there's a lot of thought out there that he is absolutely a conservative constitutionalist, and ideas about checks on executive power, right? That there are limits to Article 2, and that corruption could be one of them, I think is an argument that a lot of legal scholars would say he would welcome, that he would hear, and he would hear fairly. So I'm not convinced the court will strike down all of this if the sort of narrow executive power or foreign powers, if those kinds of arguments are brought without the whole obstruction stuff. I think that you could see some decisions in the favor of institutions for once. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know, it's a lot.
Yeah. So we don't know what's going to happen.
We don't.
I think we're in a very difficult time for our country, a bit of a constitutional crisis, as we've already indicated. And I'm not confident that the Democrats will step up to the plate and initiate impeachment proceedings. I think they're going to punt on the issue, unfortunately.
Yep.
They're going to try to carry out these other investigations. They'll be blocked and stonewalled by the Trump administration. Then what will the courts do in relation to that? That's dragging everything out, right?
Yes.
And so now we're on the cusp of the 2020 election. So
yes,
maybe in the end it all does come down to what happens in the electoral campaign of 2020.
Hopefully we're entrusting and electing folks who would stand up for the rule of law, but it's hard to know if you're not doing it when you have the chance.
If they do the hearings, maybe they can lay the groundwork for impeachment.
Yes.
Maybe through the hearings, things will become so blatant and obvious that people, like middle of the road Republicans, will swing over, and then impeachment would be possible.
That's what I think Pelosi is thinking, and why they are pushing for this middle road of investigations. Again, like 2/3 of the American public says yes, continue investigating, and what is going to be the right framing or the right witness that might start moving some of those polls in a direction that electoral politics could get on board and have that safety, right, of being able to do not just the right thing. I really think that it is the only institutional answer. And if you're given the choice between an institutional answer and your own election, darn it, you know.
Spike Lee said it.
Again, the answer can't be that if you just elect me, it'll all be fine.
Spike Lee said it. Do the right thing. Right?
Do the right thing.
Do the right thing. And unfortunately, many politicians don't.
So maybe one of the questions we should ask of our 2020 Democratic hopefuls is whether they would pardon Donald Trump and just set it up for him that way. Because there is still, all of this relies on a sitting president. I don't know that anyone would take up this case even after, if he's not elected, right? I mean, I see the likelihood of that as being pretty much slim to zero.
So you don't think a Biden Department of Justice would
I don't think
charges
so.
of
That's why I
obstruction of
think
justice?
the question to them is, would you pardon him? Just as Ford did.
And you can pardon him directly, or you can pardon him indirectly.
Indirectly.
By sitting on your hands and
That's
not
right.
doing anything
Yeah.
to follow up
That's
on
right.
the evidence that's so clearly laid out by Robert Mueller, right? Yeah. I think one of the thing again is to show the Republican hypocrisy on this issue, right? Some of the newscasters are beginning to do that.
Yes.
I mean, just all you have to do is go back to the Clinton
That's right.
impeachment.
Yeah.
There's Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Listen to what Lindsey Graham had to say about the office of the president and respect for the office, and
That's right.
or John Thune, or
That's right.
Mitch McConnell. Go back and listen to what these men said then.
That's right.
And what they're saying now or not saying now. They're
That's
being
exactly
silent
right.
now. I mean, they're total hypocrites.
Yep.
They're total hypocrites. They said one thing with regard to a Democratic
Right.
president. They say completely different thing with regard to their own guy, right?
Yeah.
So they're total hypocrites. But I think that hypocrisy needs to be thrown up into their face, right?
Yeah.
And exposed. And again, as we've said all along, the only way I think a Donald Trump presidency ends before serving out the complete term is if enough Republicans develop a spine, a backbone, and stand up to the tremendous abuses of power, which as constitutionalists, as conservatives, they should be appalled. They should be absolutely appalled at what this man is doing.
Yes.
What this man is doing to our country, what this man is doing to their party, what this man is doing to their electoral chances. And yet, they can't summon the courage to stand up to him.
Yeah. So how do we frame that in order to give them the space that makes it okay to say some of those things, right?
So that's why I think hearings could help.
Yeah.
To me, the greatest damage to the country is the re-election of Donald Trump. So we have to stop that.
Yeah.
And if this is going to imperil that scares me to death.
Yeah, I guess, I definitely feel that. And I've come to, in thinking about this for a while now, Trump is also a symptom of the partisanship, of the degrading of these norms over time, over a lot of other things, right? And so, is it just him? And right,
No,
and
it's
my,
not just
my
him.
answer to that is no. So when confronted again with this choice between, is it winner take all, two-party system, and once I'm in charge, we'll do it right? That sounds very much like what Trump says. And that bothers me, right, as a political institutionalist. So that's now my why I think we probably need to go down these other constitutional roads that were laid out for us for exactly these situations, because we got to restore the rest of the things that got us to elect Donald Trump in the first place. If we don't start looking at those as well as looking at just Trump, we won't fix it.
Yeah, Donald Trump didn't start the hyper-partisan political polarization, the tremendous influence of money on campaigns, the
Right.
corporate influence on our electoral process.
That's right.
He's a symptom of that much deeper structural problems and
Yeah.
institutional problems, and so we've got to address that larger issue as well.
Yeah.
And if we concentrate too much on impeaching Donald Trump, then the larger context gets ignored.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time for today's program, and I did want to take the opportunity to point out something that's coming up in front of the City Commission, actually. It's coming up on Monday, May the 6th at 7 p.m. At the City Commission meeting, City Hall, 241 West South Street. And there's an effort to develop a community conversation about a proposal that will be in front of the Commission to support human rights for Israelis and Palestinians by ending U.S. military aid to Israel. And so people are invited to come to the City Commission, get a chance, an opportunity to speak on this issue. Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, its working group on Israel and Palestine, is promoting this resolution. They'd like to see a lot of people come down there to join with them to try to build peace with justice and equality for the Palestinian people and to end U.S. military aid to Israel. So this is an important event, and it's coming up.
Very important event. And nationally, there's a lot of pressure to silence people speaking up for the Palestinian issue, and this is an opportunity to speak out and take a very strong stand for human rights.
And there's an effort to shut down conversation by calling
right.
people who speak in favor of this as anti-Semitic, and
That's
that's
exactly right.
simply a political tactic to block speech, to shut down the conversation.
Right.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Don Cooney and Denise Keel, and we thank you for joining us. Please come back and visit us again on Critical Issues, Alternative Views.